This program is sponsored in part by the National Catholic Society of Foresters. Hello again, I'm Jim Grant, and it's my privilege again to be introducing you to a special guest, someone who comes all the way from Santa Clara University. Dr. Joseph A. Morris is the director of the graduate program in Pastoral Ministry at that great Jesuit university in the Silicon Valley. But believe it, that's the Silicon Valley, I'm not kidding. But we in the Central Valley are looking at ways to partner with this great Jesuit university and this specific program in restorative justice. So I think we should begin, Joe, with you self-introducing just a little about yourself and the wonderful University of Santa Clara. Tell us why it is not only your favorite university, but why people in the Central Valley should think of it as a destination for their bright students.
Well, I think the thing that's most impressive to me about Santa Clara, and I've been there for about 15 years now, and I taught for a number of years in the undergraduate department, and all undergraduate students have to take 3 religious studies or theology courses during their time at Santa Clara, and so I taught in the department for many years, and then just recently, this is my 3rd year as the director of the graduate program in Pastoral Ministries. But one of the things that most impressed me about the Jesuit charism is this kind of desire to kind of form the whole person, and to try to make things like, religious studies, theology, and finding God in all things is really one of the kind of special features of the Jesuit charism. So trying to teach undergrads how to find God in their lives as they live today in the very real situations in which they find themselves. And I think there's a real attempt in the Jesuit, an explicit attempt in the Jesuit charism to make that connection with people and to try to do that. And so I think that's one of the great things about Jesuit universities in general, and certainly Santa Clara in the Silicon Valley where there's all this tech stuff going on. It's a real opportunity to try to help people to say we live in a data-driven world now. How do we continue to find God in that? How do we continue to make connections with helping other people? And be more than just educating our heads, but also our hearts.
It's from 1851. That's only 2 years after the gold rush. This school goes way back in time. People would not remember or think that California, which is not as old as Massachusetts, but it does have a history, and schools were founded right after the discovery of gold. Yeah. But it's with the spirit of St. Ignatius that I think you told us that this full human person being developed. Did you want to say anything else about that gift of Ignatius to your own vocation as a professor and a director? Where does Ignatius fit into your life?
For me, I think one of the most significant connections was how to help myself, but also help other people to find God in their lives. To make sometimes, especially in pastoral ministry, to try to come through the experience of people's experience of ministry itself to look at theology and things like that. So as opposed to perhaps studying theology as, not to say that it's not an important subject to study in its own right, but to kind of come through the experience of where people are and the needs that they have, and to try to make those kinds of connections. So I think the Jesuit charism tries to do that regularly, to use education as a vehicle for developing all of the aspects of the person, as well as the aspects of the community and the needs of the community that are poignant at that time.
Way before Ignatius, there was Jesus, and I guess it's the Society of Jesus that does all this, these SJs.
Right.
Jesus gives us an example, and I think you wanted to talk about how the very example of our Lord is what really is at the heart of the restorative justice specialization at Santa Clara.
Yes, that is true for sure. I mean, I think one of the things that becomes clear if one is examining Jesus' ministry as the inspiration for things is that Jesus' ministry reached out particularly to those people most in need, those people who perhaps were excluded from society, and it attempted in a real concrete way to try to address, to reach out to those people, as opposed to maybe just reaching out to those people who were immediately around him but to actually go to the excluded, to go to those in need and the poor and the outcast. And I think that's what gives inspiration really to pastoral ministry in general. The fact that the question is, what are the needs of the people that I'm called to serve? And kind of the example of Jesus is, washing of the feet becomes a poignant jumping off point for that, or an image for that to kind of fuel our imaginations on how to really can continue to respond to the needs of people in our communities.
Addressing particularly your special program, which is able to be seen as the Santa Clara specialization in pastoral ministry, the graduate program that you direct, what would you want to say about the effort to reach out to those who are your students? And we do have certain images that might remind us of who are we working with, who are these candidates for this formation in restorative justice. So what might you want to say about some of them?
Well, I think our program, it was formed back like 37 years ago by two sisters who were responding to the needs of the Bishop of San Jose to come to the diocese and form a school of pastoral ministry, a place where people could become educated regarding the recently concluded Second Vatican Council. And they did do that, and it's, as I said, it's now 36 years old. So it really appeals to, I think, lay people predominantly who are involved in any form of ministry, and they can kind of come at it through any form of ministry. It could be in a parish, and usually is in a parish situation, or sometimes a diocesan situation. But there are also situations where people are not involved in parishes, and they come with a deep sense of service and a call to a vocation to ministry. And so we have people from all walks of life. I think over 60% of the students in the program presently are women, a very strong cohort of women, in the sense of attempting to kind of come at what they see as the needs of their community, but also of many men who are coming from different experiences, from all walks of life, from all nationalities and ethnic backgrounds. And just all responding to the call to serve, to be responding to the needs of the community. And so I think the shape of the graduate program in pastoral ministries over those 37 years has changed somewhat, in the sense that in every age the church has different needs that it seeks to respond to, because society changes, the world changes. And so we've been trying to be attentive to that, and I think in the past the history of the program has been attentive to the various kind of changes that have taken place in society and in church, and trying to respond to those needs in a way that...
Now, one way that you're responding right now, as we speak, is by this intentional connection with the California Catholic Conference,
Yes.
and with Debbie McDermott, and with the effort of reaching out to the dioceses through this specialization in this particular ministry. Can you let us know more, Dr. Morris, about that connection with the CCC and with Debbie?
Sure, yeah. I think one of the things that became really important to Debbie, in fact, she has said to us that she looked for like 20 years for some university to collaborate with to help to form and to train people and give them a theological kind of foundation of all those people that are involved in any kind of restorative justice ministry or chaplaincy. So it was really her initiative more than anyone else's, that we sat down and had a meeting, and eventually had, she made it very clear the needs of training for that. And we then started to form a group that was composed of various people who are doing restorative justice and chaplaincy in prisons and healthcare. And we began to talk a little bit about what would it look like if we could take some of the courses that we have in the general master's program for Pastoral Ministries, and kind of tweak them to respond to the needs of restorative justice practitioners and chaplains. And so we came up with these 5 courses that we have now that attempt to really address those features, and it becomes part of what is this new emphasis that we have in restorative justice and chaplaincy. But it was a year in the formation process, and we did have time to actually present it to the bishops so that it was something that they became much more aware of, and I would say all of that was really at the goodness of Debbie McDermott's coordination.
So speaking of Debbie, for those that don't know her well, she would be someone I'm working with monthly, every month, and twice a year we go off on retreat with the directors of Social Justice Ministry, Restorative Justice. So why don't you update us, Joe, about, we were just in Chicago with 2 other people from the Monterey Diocese, and Debbie and yourself and myself. What was it that brought you to Loyola University Chicago, and also brought Debbie and also me, so that we could learn more about restorative justice? What was the offer? Why were we there? What did you take home from Chicago?
So the Catholic Extension gave a grant to Loyola Chicago to gather people who were either involved in prison ministry or involved in restorative justice ministry generally, a practitioner of restorative justice, and to come to Chicago and get some kind of really intensive information and formation around various aspects of restorative justice. And that was, so for my part in it was, after all, having this program and being kind of the overseer of this restorative justice and chaplaincy emphasis, I felt I really needed to become better informed about how I could incorporate some of these wonderful things that we learned together. It was great to be able to meet you there, and to be part of Steve Brow and Jose Alcala, who were both deacons from Monterey Diocese, and we had a real California contingent kind of there together to do this, and to kind of I guess I would say expand our repertoire of practices and understanding of restorative justice.
I have my binder, which I'll show off right here. You can't really see it very well, but it's a binder, and it's complete with so many resources that we were benefiting from the blessings of the university and Catholic Extension to help us when we go back to do better, whatever it was we're trying to do. So I wonder, Joe, did anything in particular give you, I guess, either a new energy or a renewed energy, a new insight, an encouragement as to either the curriculum of the program that you are working with now in its birth? Is there something that that would have been enough, just seeing that person, just hearing that was really gonna, you think, influence what goes on at Santa Clara.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think one of the things that really gelled for me was the fact that restorative justice is not just about detention ministry, that it's about, there's restorative justice practices for parenting, there's restorative justice practices for schools, instead of maybe punishing a student for such and such, to try to begin to understand and get ownership on the student's part for their part in some infraction that they've taken part in. It's not, sometimes I think people think restorative justice is this, kind of letting people off the hook for what they're doing. That's not what it's about. It's about trying to heal some of the disrupted relationships that have occurred. So that came across loud and clear, and it led us actually to a kind of a broadening of what restorative justice is, and therefore a broadening in the sense of what kind of students would get involved in a program and how they could use this particular degree, as well as chaplaincy too. The chaplaincy is not just the hospital chaplain or the prison chaplain, but also there's chaplains. The campus ministers are often called chaplains. There's lots of different ways, bereavement groups, that people who so we began to see this kind of broadening of both of the terms of this and ways in which people could benefit from the program, and then of course getting a lot of information that we could integrate into the program and use to kind of help people in their formation and training.
As of the recording today on, October 30th, 2019, how is the, let's say, the outreach from Santa Clara working so far? What's the first responders? And I think there are friends in San Diego.
Yes,
there's like a cohort.
Yeah.
Introduce us to how it is that Bobby and the energy that he brings to the Diocese of San Diego got something for you way down at the end of the state.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right. So we decided that maybe what would be most beneficial, we're not so sure if it's the best way to do it, but at least that's what we're trying at first, is this kind of have two hubs, one in the north, and we're going to begin in Oakland in the winter of 2020, this coming January, with a cohort there, so that if there are interest in other dioceses to come to Oakland for the restorative justice emphasis. We have other emphases, obviously, but this emphasis of restorative justice will be in Oakland, and then we started in the fall of this year in San Diego.
Nice.
And it was really through the, as you said, the instrumentation of Bobby Eno and his really connections that said, hey, we really need to have this happening, because he was very much involved in managing and himself doing restorative justice in prisons and with his chaplains that were there. So we started with 10 people in the cohort, and we have actually others who are coming down from, we're also in Los Angeles and San Bernardino in Southern California. And so there's students from both of those locations who come to join the restorative justice cohort there for some courses. And so there's the first class has like 12 in it, and the first course that we're teaching in San Diego is practical theology or pastoral theology. So it's a great experience, really gifted people who are, again, involved in restorative justice in all kinds of different ways other than just detention ministry, although there's a significant core of them that are involved in prison ministry, but there's others who are doing other kinds of stuff in schools and things like that. So it's a very exciting time for us, to say the least, and we see a lot of interest among different groups of people who are, they've wanted something like this, and making that a reality is really exciting for us, and challenging.
Something you said a minute ago really, really gels with me right now. Restorative justice isn't just about detention ministry. It could be applied to parenting. So you think of parenting, you think of, but what about the prodigal son? He really needed some restorative justice. And that's exactly, it seems, what Jesus is introducing us to in that powerful parable of the prodigal son. So I wonder if you want to work around that theme of the prodigal son and lead us into the type of outreach that your program will lead people to be better prepared to minister, not exclusively, but also very well in prison settings. It's also an important part of what we might be doing in restorative justice. Our diocese has 14 state prisons, many county jails, and has more incarcerated people than any diocese in God's world.
Right.
So your courses are going to help us willy-nilly. They will.
Right.
But about the prodigal and about our persons imprisoned, what would you like to say the skills people may be learning to better minister to the ones who most need our loving care?
I think, my background's in the New Testament and Luke's Gospel specifically, and so I'm always taken by, Luke chapter 4, where Jesus goes into the synagogue and says, to preach the gospel to the poor, he has sent me to proclaim liberty to captives, recovery of sight to the blind, and to proclaim a year of the Lord's favor. And the thing that I think impresses me about Jesus' ministry is his connection with people. He actually, when he does his healings, he touches people, which is that's a no-no in the in the ancient world. So that kind of incarnational dimension, when I started to learn about restorative justice, it kind of was like this awakening to what he was about in his ministry, that both met people individually and collectively. And I think restorative justice, it tries to talk a little bit about trying to restore, and then not restore to what was before, but to restore us to the image of God that every one of us was created to be, and when people go off the track, so to speak, and don't become images of God, and we all have experiences of that in our own lives, when that happens, restoration to realizing that I'm not the sum of my worst deed, requires to some degree the challenge of being able to, in a really concrete way, address the person who has done the offense, address those who have been victimized, and address the larger community in which they live. And that's kind of the core of what restorative justice is about. How can we mend those relationships? We have to tend to them. There's all kinds of ways in which we just ignore them. We lock people up and put them away. And so I think training people to think creatively invites them into a form of ministry that says, okay, what are the needs of this person, of this community? And what are the skills that I need to develop in my life, both academic, but also spiritual. I mean, as somebody who just comes in with a solution, some way in which, like Jesus touching people and knowing that, he's there for them in a really profound way, I think is really the core of what we're trying to do in restorative justice.
I'm supposing with this new program, Joe, that it's a blessing that it's there, but it's not going to be built on goodwill and a lot of, it's going to take generosity and donors. It's going to take funding. Do you want to tell us how it is that the university was able to make this wonderful possibility available to us?
Yes, yeah. So first of all, I think the Jesuits themselves have made a significant contribution to a grant to the program itself, and so some of that money comes from the Jesuit community to support all of the graduate program of pastoral ministry and also the restorative justice. Then there is other monies from the university itself that are available. We have scholarships from donors. We have full scholarships from several donors that are available. We have, every student gets what's called a ministry scholarship, which is a 25% support for the whole program, so that every single course that you take is usually 4 units. So we pay for one of those 4 units. and you just have to be involved in some form of ministry in order to have that available. And then we have opportunities for people that are need more assistance, and so we have financial aids for from 10 to 25% more in addition to that 25%. So those funds are given by either generous donors, among them the Jesuits, as well as, and because of the significant commitment of the Jesuits to the formation of lay people for ministry.
You know, not only were you here for this program, you drove all the way across, thank you so much, but you did get to visit Bishop Joe.
I did,
So
yes.
tell us, first visit, he's only been here a little while. What is it that you picked up from Bishop Brennan?
Right, yes. So this was kind of an initial, I think, meeting to talk a little bit about the needs of the diocese regarding formation for ministry and the ways in which we can help and assist in that. And he was very receptive to learning about some of the program and the availability of things in the program. And we talked a little bit about where we have the program. One of the things that we spoke a little bit about was the proximity of Monterey to the diocese here, so that if people from the diocese were interested, again, as I said, this is more an initial conversation, but they may be able to join the Monterey group because it's not quite as far away as I had thought it was. I had thought it was further, and then but he was mentioning that it's not as far as like going to Oakland.
Yeah. In about a minute, is there anything that you needed to say about this wonderful program or about your university so that we can wrap up this great introduction to your graduate specialization in restorative justice, Dr. Morris?
Great, yes. I think that the only thing I would say was, that we have a great website where you maybe check it out if you'd like, and see some of the opportunities that we have and some of the things that I didn't mention. But that website is www.scu.edu/pastoral ministries. I'm sorry, Pastoral Ministries, PASTORALMINISTRIES. And that will give you kind of a broad picture of what's available. And if you want to contact me, feel free to contact me at J.A. Morris, MORRIS, JAMORRIS @scu.edu. If you have any questions or any other information that you might need, and I'd be happy to provide you with the information.
I promise that if anybody is interested in anything regarding restorative justice, be in touch with me, and I will put you in touch with Dr. Morris and the great University of Santa Clara in the Silicon Valley. Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure seeing
Jim.
you today.
It was totally my pleasure.
God bless.
Thank you. Same to you.